Good afternoon and welcome to our special City Council meeting Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. Let it be known that all members of the council are present, and I'm going to look for a motion of approval for the agenda barring nothing changed.
No changes.
No changes. Need a motion for approval of the agenda in a second, please.
I'll move to approve. I'll second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Olvera, second by Councilmember Espinoza. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Alvarado,
Yes.
House,
Yes.
Olvera,
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
and Gibbons.
Yes. At this time, we're going to open up for public comment. Any person wishing to speak on any item included on the agenda or on any other matter within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council are invited to speak from the podium. Speakers have 5 minutes. Please address with your name, address, and before making your presentation. Nothing online. Seeing none. Public comment time is closed. Moving into our management reports, tonight we have 2 items on our management report. Can't even talk. 2 items on our management report. I apologize. Item number 1 is our 10-year financial forecast model. City manager, please.
Sorry, Mayor and Council. Last year, we came to you with the proposal to develop a financial forecast model. A financial forecast model is a very useful tool that allows us to make present day financial decisions, budgetary decisions with a long-term perspective. So it's a really good management and planning tool. This will allow us to do numerous exercises to be able to forecast our financial position with any shift in economic factors, any shifts in revenue from the state, grants or otherwise. So making the presentation this evening is our consultant, but I want to have Roger come up and make the presentation on that. Roger.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Roger Sanchez, Finance Director. So as the city manager has introduced the subject, this financial model is not the typical where we see the next year projections, but rather it gives a broad overview. You know, what would happen if we add 6 new officers, or what would happen if we have a pay increase of X amount %? What if there's a recession? So it answers broad questions, long-term financial perspective. So it's a really useful tool. The presenter is a very experienced consultant. He has extensive experience in financial management, municipal government. His name is Bob Leland. And he's going to present, he's going to have a presentation. He will also provide a demo of the model. So Bob, if you can, okay, pass the time to you.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm pleased to be with you tonight. I am Bob Leland from the consulting firm Baker Tilly. Our assignment here, as was pointed out, was to prepare a long-range financial model that gives you the flexibility to demonstrate a wide range of financial scenarios regarding the general fund. Our firm's experience, we are the 10th largest accounting and consulting firm in the United States, actually the world. Our public sector practice works exclusively with local agencies nationwide, including all of the largest 20 California cities. We've developed long-range fiscal models for over 40 cities during the last 10 years. And much of that modeling approach was developed during the extensive bankruptcy litigation in the city of Stockton's Chapter 9 proceeding, which we helped that city coordinate. In terms of my own experience, I have been in state and local government finance for 48 years. I was the director of finance for the city of Fairfield for 26 of those years. I've been a consultant with First Management Partners and then Baker Tilly over the last 12 years. 2 years ago, Baker Tilly acquired Management Partners and our team came over to join the larger firm. Some of my personal projects have been on the Stockton bankruptcy and working with the town of Paradise's recovery after their fire. I have 41 years of hands-on experience with long-range forecasting. I've created fiscal models for 45 different local agencies and 126 separate forecasts. So that's a lot of forecasting experience. And one of the things that I found after working with you is that Shafter is unique. Historically, you've been conservative in your approach to spending. And in no small part due to that, you have a very high level of reserves. You have the Williams-Sonoma sales tax agreement. You have a brand new Amazon fulfillment center. You have lots of room to grow, large industrial areas. The map here is from your general plan going back to 2005, but major areas to the east and the southeast of the city, and the city is fast growing. In terms of a quick general fund overview, just taking a look at fiscal year 24, a couple of things stand out. One is the very large sales tax as a proportion of total city revenues. 60% is high compared to other cities. Should say 60 here. And that's due to the Williams-Sonoma sales tax agreement assumed in effect through fiscal year 24. The development agreement allocations are 16% of the general fund. So that is a large portion of the general fund expenditure, but that is just passing through money to the various parties that are sharing in those sales tax proceeds. In terms of the revenue for fiscal year 24, it's almost $46 million. Only $35 million of that has been budgeted. So there's a significant net revenue from the current year. In terms of the baseline revenue forecast, our goal here is to determine the revenues that the city can rely upon to meet its ongoing expenses at its current level of service. So the forecast includes reasonable assumptions of revenue growth in the context of both long-term and recent experience. And we include economic cycles in our forecasts to realistically portray the kind of stress that you're going to realize when recessions do occur. Now, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't tell you exactly when a recession will occur and the magnitude of it, but the model has great flexibility in determining the timing of recessions, the magnitude, the recovery period, and the cycle between recessions. Now, if you look at the chart in the lower left-hand corner of this slide, over the past several years, the general fund's recurring revenues, which are the green bars, have been much higher than the recurring expenditures, which is the black line. The red portion of the bars just reflect one-time revenues, which will periodically occur. So let's take a look at this issue of recessions. The chart on the left shows over the last almost 100 years, the official time period of recessions. So those are the orange bars. The red line is the US unemployment rate, and not surprisingly, there's a strong correlation between those two. You can see the red circle was the peak of unemployment in April of 2020 during the pandemic. Things quickly recovered, but that was as bad as it got back in 2020. So recessions have occurred on average about every 7 years since 1927. The adverse impacts on local government revenues, however, often lag the term of this official recession period, even though the period of negative gross domestic product growth nationally may cease and it may turn positive. There's often a lag time for sales tax and other key local government revenues. The chart on the right gives you an indication of the magnitude of revenue loss for each of the last 7 recessions. Now, all recessions are not created equal. Their causes vary, timing and magnitude can vary, but based on state controller data on key revenue sources, we were able to determine the gaps that exist economically over this period of time from 1969 to the present, and roughly the amount of revenue that was lost by cities collectively in the state. Any given cities mileage may vary, but you can see there were three large recessions in the early 70s, the early 80s, and then the Great Recession, of course. And then the other four recessions were all much smaller in magnitude. The pandemic started out gangbusters in terms of revenue loss, but then quickly recovered. Now, in terms of city growth, we have state controller or State Department of Finance information on both housing units and population growth. The chart on the left shows the new housing units per year since 1991. The average over that time has been 105 units a year. In the wake of the Great Recession, there was a fairly low period. In recent years, that average has been higher. The average annual growth rate in units is 2.6%. In terms of the population, the chart on the right shows steady growth since 1990 through 2023. Pretty steady, little fall off during the Great Recession and then in the wake of the COVID pandemic. But overall, the average annual growth has been 2.9%. And over the last 30 plus years, the population of the city has more than doubled. Now, in terms of what this translates to in terms of major revenue trends, the chart shows property tax in blue, sales tax in the red dotted line, fees and permits in green, and all other revenues in yellow. So we're assuming that moderate recessions will occur every year, every 7 years, starting in fiscal year 27. And so on the sales tax, you see a little dip here, which reflects that moderate recession. The sales tax drop is because we're assuming the end of the Williams-Sonoma tax agreement starting the end of this year with prospective loss of revenue only. So the future revenue is based on the Avenue Insights forecast, which is about 2.5% growth a year. And we're assuming that the full Amazon revenue is reflected starting in fiscal year 24. The property tax, we have a specific formula for that. We're assuming that 96% of existing parcels grow at the 2% limit under Prop 13, that 4% of parcels grow an average of 40%, and that's to account for ownership transfers. And then we're assuming 100 new housing units per year plus $5 million of non-residential value. That would result in property tax growth of 4.8%. Now, there certainly is a potential for higher development. There is a lot of land that is properly zoned for not only residential development, but commercial industrial. And so there is certainly the prospect of additional units, and the model can take that into account. But we started out with just sort of replicating the average of the last 30 years. We're assuming fee and permit growth at 2%, all other revenue, which is a mixture of other taxes, other revenue sources, grows at 2.8%. Now, in terms of the baseline expenditure forecast, what we're doing here is determining the ongoing trend of expenditure based on the current workforce, plus the impact of some pending projects and service level changes that the city staff has provided us with. It includes reasonable assumptions as to compensation and inflation growth. Inflation growth is beyond your control. Compensation is largely within your control, but it is a meet and confer item. And so it depends on future negotiations. Now, how spending is allocated by department or program is going to be based on city budget priorities, but we're looking at the major drivers of expense. So salaries, pensions, healthcare, operations and maintenance, capital and debt service. Now, there are risks in the forecast, certainly. The balance will drop if additional full-time equivalent positions are added, or if COLA is higher than the 2.5% that we have built in or awarded, or if inflation is higher than 2.5%, or if lower CalPERS returns wind up resulting in higher unfunded liability costs. The most likely reason for a lower expense is simply a higher vacancy rate in positions. That is something that we see occurring throughout the state. It's hard to attract good employees and keep them, and there's turnover, so there are vacancies. If you take a look at the chart in the lower left, it compares the recurring expense with the blue bars and one-time expense reflected in the red part of the bar to the recurring revenue. And again, the recurring revenue is higher than the recurring expense. Now, several factors come to bear in taking a look at the issue of expenditure growth. One is the issue of inflation. Whoops, come back. Inflation. The chart shows in the bars, the San Francisco Bay Area inflation, and the red line is a composite measure of U.S. cities generally, Western urban area, and then the San Francisco Bay Area. So both are moving in the same direction. In any given year, there may be some difference, but basically they're moving the same way. Interestingly, at the peak inflation recently in 2022, the Bay Area was about 5.6%, whereas nationally it was closer to 8% inflation. Now, that jump in 2022 was largely related to post-pandemic supply chain issues, and those have been getting resolved. CPI has dropped in half in 2023 under both of these measures. In the past 20 years prior to 2022, the average growth was about 2.5% in the Bay Area and about 2.25% for the composite measure. But we are assuming in the model a 2.5% ongoing inflation. Now, the other major consideration is what's happening with CalPERS investments. I have two charts here. On the left is the pension discount rate, a 45-year trend. It has been as high as 8.75%. It's currently 6.8. Now, the discount rate is the investment rate of return assumed by CalPERS. They don't always hit it. In fact, they probably never hit it exactly. It's always over or under, and that's shown in the chart on the right-hand side. As you can see, there's a fair amount of volatility from year to year in investment returns. There have been some years when they have been outright negative. In other years, they've been positive, but not as high as the discount rate. And in other years, they've exceeded the discount rate. But you can see with the red dotted line is that slowly but surely the rate of return is declining over time. Now, when those returns are lower, unfunded liability costs increase to compensate for the loss. And so what CalPERS does not collect in investments gets passed on to local agencies in terms of higher employer contributions for unfunded liability. If you take a look at this 45-year trend, it implies that in 20 years, the discount rate should be 6%. And in fact, both the CalPERS staff and their chief investment advisor indicate that without a major change in the composition of investment portfolio, that the average return over time would be closer to 6.2% and not 6.8%. And that is a reason why in our forecast, we're assuming a 6.2% return over time. It's a little on the conservative side, but I think it's borne out by a lot of past history. Now, if you take a look at these charts, there's two sets of charts. On the top, on the left, is the unfunded liability outstanding for all funds for the city of Shafter. The dark blue is the safety plan, the light green is miscellaneous. This is assuming a 6.8% discount rate and return, which is the CalPERS actuarial assumption. If they're able to meet that target, you can see that the unfunded liability all by itself will be paid off by 2046. The chart on the right shows the pension contribution by type. The yellow is what's called normal cost, and that's to pay for benefits as they are currently being accrued. The red is unfunded liability, amounts that should have been collected ideally in prior years, but weren't, and therefore that amount that wasn't collected has to be added to the normal cost, and local agencies pay for both. Now, under a 6.8% discount rate, you can see that the unfunded liability stays relatively constant and then drops significantly as a major chunk of unfunded liability is paid off in 2045, and thereafter there are just normal costs. Now, the situation is different if you look on the bottom half of the slide. This is what we have in the forecast, the more conservative assumption, and that is that there's a 6.2% rate of return. The discount rate stays at 6.8. Under that circumstance, you never pay off the unfunded liability. It just continues. There is some payoff, as you can see on the right. The unfunded liability drops, but you keep paying it because new unfunded liability keeps getting added to what remains from previously accrued unfunded liability. So this is a big change between these two outlooks. I think the reality is that we're going to be somewhere in between. There are certainly going to be years where CalPERS exceeds the 6.8% return, but there'll be other years when it's low. And what you do in a long-term forecast is you come up with an average that you think will be sustainable over time. Now, your costs are not as high as many other cities, so this is a little bit less of an issue for Shafter, but this does give you an idea that the costs long-term at best are going to be in sort of the $2 million range, and at worst, ultimately up into the $3 million a year range. Now, let's recap some of the key expenditure assumptions. In terms of the baseline forecast, we're assuming current staffing ongoing with one exception. We have the cost for 10 police personnel being added in fiscal year 25, 7 sworn and 3 non-sworn, and this is related to the police substation. The COLAs, we're assuming to be 2.5% a year, plus another 0.25%, and that is the net impact from those that get merit increases, which would be 5%. Many other employees get nothing, but offsetting that is that there are positions that turn over during the course of the year, and typically a more senior employee at a top step is the one who leaves, and then a position is refilled with a new hire at a lower step, and therefore there are savings because what you paid the position last year is going to be higher than what you're paying that position this year because the new employee is at a lower step. Health increases, we're assuming at 3% on an ongoing basis. Vacancy savings rate, we're assuming of 4%, and that's computed on all personnel costs except unfunded liability because CalPERS charges that not as a percent of payroll, but as a fixed dollar amount. As I mentioned, we're assuming 6.2 average investment returns and 6.8% discount rate. And CalPERS has what's called pension outlook model. You can feed into that various assumptions and then generate a 30-year forecast of what your costs would be. And so we're using that model with these assumptions to generate the costs. In terms of operations and maintenance and internal service costs, they are increasing at 2.25% a year. We're assuming $1 million of capital with 2.5% growth on that, plus the items in the table to the right. We have three major projects: the police substation, the aquatic center, and the North Shafter Community Park, all of which have funding sources through grants, but there are remaining amounts that would be paid by the general fund. And some of these are a work in progress, but we're assuming another $3 million from the general fund for the substation, about $2.6 million for the aquatic center, which is the rehab of the original center plus a rebuilding of the building associated with that. And then $1.9 million for the community park, which includes some additional costs for some additional facilities that are being anticipated being incorporated, pickleball courts and other things with the original design for that park. Now, when you build capital facilities like that, there are going to be ongoing maintenance costs. And so we're assuming about $1.5 million for the police substation, positions and O&M associated with that, just under $500,000 for the aquatic center, and a couple $100,000 for the community park. Again, these are early stages for these projects, and as we get better information, the model can be updated accordingly. The last major expenditure assumption is that the Williams-Sonoma developer agreements we're assuming terminate at the end of the current fiscal year. So that means from an expenditure standpoint, there won't be any more payments made to those parties to the agreement. So the major expenditure trends are as follows. Personnel is in red. Green is the O&M. Blue is tax sharing payments, and the brown is capital and other transfers. Now you can see that with the exception of some prepayment of pension costs that hit in 2018, it's been relatively steady since then, and this reflects, again, only the addition of staff relating to the police substation and the department generally. O&M costs, there was a big jump in the fiscal 24 budget for services, supplies, and internal service, such as shop, building, IT, and liability insurance. And then in 26 and 27, it includes the O&M for those new facilities that we just looked at. Now, there's a big drop, obviously, from the tax sharing, because that drops off from its high of about $12 million a year to about $4 million, with Williams-Sonoma agreement assumed to go away, but CEMEX and the pro-build agreements would remain in effect, so those payments would continue. And then the capital includes, over a couple of year period here, those amounts going into the three large capital projects, and then thereafter it's at that $1 million with growth. So now we turn to fund balance. Fund balance is the bottom line for city finances, but not all fund balance is available. There are non-spendable portions. There are, for instance, amounts that are due to other funds in the future, or amounts that are not paid yet to the general fund that are owed, or inventory, things like that, that are not spendable. There are items that are restricted or assigned, monies that have been set aside for being reserved for the tax sharing, potential liability, amounts that have been reserved for years for potential capital projects. So we're not counting those here. We're only looking at the unassigned balance of the general fund. And again, the general fund, as you'll see, can have many potential outcomes based on different scenarios that the model can run. So The baseline forecast is very favorable. It's the most favorable of any of those 45 cities that I've done. The city has significant remaining fiscal capacity even after the end of the Williams-Sonoma agreement, largely due to the impact of the Amazon Fulfillment Center. Because of that, if you take a look here, the vertical dotted line is where we are right now in fiscal 24. There's significantly high revenue that drops down with the loss of the Williams-Sonoma sales tax in the future. But because of the revenue that is still there from Amazon, we've got this significant gap of $5 to $6 million a year of between the ongoing expenses and the ongoing revenues. Now, this is before any future decision is made about how those resources would be spent. If they weren't spent, they would just accumulate. And you see this very large unassigned balance growing over time. Now, just to put this in a little context, these charts show the balance that you just saw with Amazon. And then what if there were no Amazon? If that fulfillment center had chosen to locate somewhere else in the valley, but not within your city limits, then you wouldn't be getting that revenue. The balance that would be there would still be in excess of a 20% reserve goal. And so from that standpoint, it would still be favorable, but the future fiscal capacity would be far less than what it is with Amazon. So that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Can I make a quick question here to staff?
Sure.
Is it a 20% reserve goal? I thought it was higher than that per our charter.
No, I think it's higher, even like 50% or 40%.
I thought it was 50% per our reserve goal.
And we'll
Or
verify that real
is
quick.
it 50 or 55?
I think it was 50.
So 50%? Yeah, can we get confirmation? Because I believe our charter requires us to be at 50%.
Yeah, I'll check that.
Thank you.
Yeah, even at 50%, all you've got to do is 2.5 times that. You're still well over the 50%. Okay, so in conclusion, Shafter has a significant fiscal capacity to invest in the community. That can be in terms of major capital needs or improving operating service levels. For example, if spending increased by $5 million a year, that would still leave an unassigned balance in the range of $40 million. And that is because even, with the capacity that you have from Amazon, it gives you that ability to literally spend that much extra per year. And in that case, you would have the expense level at the solid red line, which is closer to the green line, but so that there isn't much growth over time in balance. But the accumulated balance that you have starting this year would really not be depleted over time, even at that additional amount of spending. So what I'm going to do at this point is jump into the model and just give you a quick look at that. Okay, so now what you see on the screen is the Excel model. And on the top left is the fund balance chart that you just saw. The next chart you'll see is a chart that shows the change from any particular assumption revision. So for example, we have 2.5% COLAs now. If we put in 3%, then the balance goes down, and it goes down by this amount. It's cumulative over time because we're assuming it would be an extra 0.5% each year. So you can see it starts out at about 60,000, and by fiscal 33, it's almost 700,000 a year difference by making that assumption change. The next chart is a chart that you will demonstrate what the impact is for recent history and the forecast for any given element of the forecast. So for example, right now that is showing salaries. And if you instead punch in property tax, then it automatically shows you what the property tax is over time. And you can use these buttons to just scroll down and quickly take a look at the various amounts for each category. And then at the far right is the summary that we saw of total revenues and expense and the difference in fund balance. So there's a dashboard here of key assumptions, and that includes a range of scenarios for the pension returns, parameters that define what the recession might be, an annual COLA, which can also be overridden for any given year for POA, non-represented, or the miscellaneous public work employees. You can add costs. For example, if you add $2 million a year, then it shows that you just committed to something that reduces your resources by $2 million a year, and the balance goes down accordingly. By the same token, you could cut $2 million a year, and then that shows that you've gained in resources because of the cut, and then the balance goes up. There are various factors here. We indicated what happens with and without Amazon. Amazon obviously drops significantly if that revenue were to not exist. And then we can add FTEs for police or miscellaneous in any given year, as opposed to just an even amount each year. In taking a look at the salaries, one thing that's interesting is that you see the trend here going over time with no additional staff other than those police positions. It runs lower than the long-term trend. But if you go back here and say, well, let's add 2 miscellaneous positions a year, then you are right back on the long-term trend, which has been very stable since 2018. So that just gives you a little bit of context for what things look like for the addition of additional positions, changes in COLAs. You can come down here. We've got these the police annex, the aquatic center, and the community park in here, but you can add more projects and more operating costs to that. And no matter what combination that you pick of recessions and impacts of future development, COLAs, new capital projects, you will automatically get the response. The model will tell you exactly where you stand over time. You can actually go out, if you wish, to a 20-year forecast, which is even more volatile and questionable over time, because 20 years is a long time. But you can show the 10-year forecast. You can show, a 5-year forecast. So a lot of flexibility in the model. So at this point, that concludes my presentation, and I am available to respond to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Leland. Mr. Mayor, to answer your question, the policy calls, and this is in the operating budget, it should have 50% of the operating expenses. So we have about 25 million in operating expenses on the general fund. So we have to have at a minimum 50% of that in the unassigned fund balance.
Okay. Is that why, excuse me, is that where the 20% is coming from then? Because it's 50% of the unassigned, so it's actually not the full amount of the unassigned or that balance? Help me understand where the 20% came from at that.
Well, the 20% is just the number that we typically use for cities. The GFOA recommends a minimum of 2 months, which would be about 17%. We usually round that up to 20. So definitely we'll plug the 50% in. That is a high level, but of course the amount, if it's of the operating budget, there are certain amounts for capital and debt service that might conceivably be excluded from that calculation.
Agree. That's why I was asking the question.
Any other questions?
Council? No? All right.
Yeah, I just want to add that this is, as we said, it's a tool. It's a forecast model that when we go into the budget, so as we're presenting any additional request as part of the budget, we'll be able to utilize this model and put in the variables in terms of increase to operating budget that you'll be able to see what the impact long-term over the course of, 10 years minimally, or as Mr. Leland said, you could do it in a short-term period of 5 years, even 20 years. Keep in mind that the further you go out, it's like even our own vision, right? It becomes a little bit harder to see and it's not as focused, but it's just a useful tool that it gives you perspective in terms of the present day decisions we're making that are involving budgetary financial decisions, that you're able to at least get an idea the long-term effect. Granted, there's a lot of other economic factors that would have to take place, because if you're just adding new revenue, for example, as Mr. Leland explained with the new fulfillment center, there's other variables that can impact that. There's change of sales tax distribution in the future, decline of online sales, different variables like that we just aren't able to predict today. But again, it's just a useful tool for you, for us management, to be able to have on hand when we're considering long-term decisions impacting the city, especially when we're talking about a growing city. We're one of the fastest growing cities, and operational capacity, we're going to have to continue to increase that. You add more parks, you're going to have more open space and grass to mow. You add more housing, more businesses, all of that takes into play. So as we grow, we have a tool that will allow us to take into consideration what's the growing expense to our operating budget as we continue to grow. Right? So again, this is, I think Roger's very pleased with it. I think he'll be the one that uses it the most. We'll all have access to it. But again, I think it'll be very useful. So I want to thank Mr. Leland for all his work and the end product that we have for the city.
Could you update us a little bit? Could we be updated a little on what we spent at this point for this project, as well as the future expenses?
So I believe it was 40,000.
Well, the
I know we
budget,
approved, didn't we, at one time?
Yeah. So
yeah,
the
we
consultant
approved,
was
but the
about-
expenses is lower than that. I believe, and maybe Mr. Leland has better information, but around $24,000 so far.
But are there ongoing costs?
No.
No.
And then there's
No.
no contract or anything like that?
No. So
It's just we purchased it now and then we.
yeah. So what we basically paid is for Mr. Leland's time to create the model. I mean, it's basically a very robust Excel spreadsheet. But the complexity in creating it with all the different formulas, the links, those of you that are familiar with Excel, that's very complex to create these workbooks. So we basically paid for a lot of the time and material, but it was more the time to put it together, analyzing. Roger provided a lot of financial information, all our memorandum of understandings with the union, our PERS, our wages, our budgets, our audits. All of that was reviewed and taken into consideration and then put into the spreadsheet. What you're seeing is the dashboard, but behind that is an entire workbook, individual spreadsheets of all this financial information of the city. This is all our own our own information, and all that information is put into the workbook itself and all the different spreadsheets. All of that information then is linked, formulas are created, whatever else they do in terms of the formulas, and then all of that is what creates the dashboard. So the dashboard is not just simply a few charts and whatnot. It's all the financial information that was utilized to create that end product.
So what is the cost going forward now? Do you know?
There is,
There is no
Nothing?
additional cost for this. It's a one-time cost.
Okay, so it's.
No. It'll be up to us in the future to update it, because there'll be data that
Add
changes.
whatever.
So the financial data is based on what we know today,
Mhm.
our audits, our budget, right? But in the future, if PERS rates change, if we do different MOUs with our unions, all of those economic factors change, then we'll need to go in and update that information so that it stays current and relevant.
But
Right.
we can do that, huh?
Yeah, that's something, Roger can learn to do and go in and, so now we have the master template, if you will.
Yeah, there-
So,
I
yeah.
know you and I talked a little bit about it before, so.
Yeah, but there is no future ongoing costs. It's not a proprietary software that we have to pay an annual license or anything like that with some of our other software that we do. That's not the case with this. So no questions for Mr. Leland.
Yeah, no further questions. Ms. O'Leland, thank you very much for your time once again.
Thank
Sure. Good night.
Good night. Mr. Sanchez, thank you very much for that as well. Much appreciated. Okay, moving on to item number 2, which is our fiscal year 2023-2024 mid-year budget update.
Chair, Mayor and Council, as is customary, we do a mid-year budget review presentation to you to let you know how we're tracking as it relates to our current operating budget for fiscal year 23-24. This evening, we'll be covering how we're doing with our revenues, our expenditures, and then also to customary during the mid-year budget reviews, that we're making any requests that may have changed due to either operational necessities, statutory, or regulatory. We incorporate that and we present that as well. So tonight's presentation, Roger will give you an overview of our budget in terms of how we're doing with our revenues and our expenditures. And then there are 3 different budget requests that we'll be presenting. One is related to future planning of the new Gossamer Grove Police Substation. And then one is related to economic development. And then one is a minor budget amendment for facilities. But before I get ahead of myself, I'll let Roger go ahead. Roger?
Mr. Mayor, once again, Roger Sanchez, Finance Director. So this should be a short presentation. Just a heads up, we do have another presentation on finance later on at 6 o'clock for the financial, but that should be short. This is related to the mid-year, as the city manager has mentioned. So in the past year, when we adopted the budget, our projected revenues, we've come a lot higher than we anticipated especially on the property taxes. So we're requesting an adjustment to make on our financial system to increase the revenue to reflect the new reality that we have the additional revenue. So the adjustment that we're proposing is $3.61 million on the general fund revenue increase, and 3.28 relates to the taxes. And there's a portion that relates to the franchise fees. Most of that is related to a correction that was made, so on the franchise fees related to prior years. We also are making a decrease of $1.35 million related to the sales tax agreements. And this is because we're expecting to collect less on some of those agreements due to the recession, and therefore we're going to pay less on those agreements. So I wanted to give you a quick summary of the compound annual growth rate. So you can see a summary level on sales taxes, property taxes, and franchise fees, and the total taxes for the general fund. You can see a historical perspective on various years. The most recent year that we closed is the year 22-23. And you can see that on sales taxes, we have a 6-year compound growth rate of 8%. On the property taxes, it's almost 11%, that's 10.6%. And on the franchise fees is at 16.9% increase for a total taxes growth rate of 8.8%. Again, the franchise fees, there was an adjustment that was made this year. This is historical taxes in a chart. We have the sales taxes on the first in millions of dollars, and then we have the property taxes. Now, this it overshadows, those sales taxes overshadow the property taxes, but if we really look into the amount of increases over the past few years, you notice the projected on 23-24 is at $8.1 million on the property taxes. This is an impressive growth. And then we have the franchise fees and the total, as we have $33.4 million taxes in the year that we closed, and we expect this slight growth on the next year. Deeper dive on the property taxes. So we have a trend here on the property taxes. Oops. Again, once we isolate the property taxes, we can see back in 17-18 at 3.8 million, with now looking at $8.1 million projected at the end of this fiscal year. So as you can see from the year that we closed at, it's 6.9 to 8 million. That's a significant increase over 1 year.
And what does that do to?
So a lot of it is, as we have the new houses in the Gossamer Grove, but most importantly, the wonderful industrial parks, there's a lot of new warehouses that is leased out to tenants, Smuckers and all those companies. All of that is developed property, and that has generated a year-over-year consistent increases in the property taxes. Of course, that's in addition to the normal core in the city core that we have, but that, you know, that would be flat, whereas the growth is on the south side. This is continuing with the property taxes. You can see reading down by year. There's a year-over-year increase. So, for example, on the 18-19, there's a $290,000 increase or a 7.7% increase. So, if you go down the line, in the year 2021, there's a 17.5% increase on those property taxes, and overall, there's the projected 16.7% increase. The 6-year growth is again at 10.6%. So as previously discussed, the general fund is healthy. Now, we estimated last year when we did the budget to have an increase of $300,000, but in reality, we're going to surpass over $4 million once we're done with the budget adjustments. It's worth noting that with those increases, obviously, we also have needs for the new substation. That's, we're gonna be spending more potentially on police officers and things like that. And this is part of the request that we have. Starting with the request, we do have a special one-time cost that we're requesting $300,000 on legal fees on a pending item that you're aware of related to the tax agreement. We also have a software subscription, an ongoing annual cost of $12,000. This is related to economic development software. Other requests relate to the total request of $68,000 related to repairs and maintenance for facilities. A bulk of it came from the building, the fence building that was previously authorized by the city council. So right now we would just make the adjustment at this point. On the fiber, there's some broken boxes and that need repairs and maintenance that amount to $25,000. Now, for the last is the main is the police request for this mid-year. The total adjustment impacted for this budget would be $179,000. That's what we're requesting to make the adjustment. Now, within that, the expenses will hit on the next year's budget, but we're asking to authorize the city manager to proceed with the different requests. One of them is the license plate readers, which is 25 readers at initial cost, one-time cost of 92,000. And then ongoing cost next year and going forward would be $75,000 per year. One full-time dispatcher at estimated annual cost of 117,000, and an extra help dispatcher at $50,000. We're also asking that you authorize the city manager to have one crime data analyst and 4 police full-time police officers for this mid-year, meaning we're not going to make the adjustment this year, but it'll allow the city manager to go ahead and proceed with the process. And then, we'll start paying the employees in the next fiscal year.
So what are those anticipated costs?
On which one, Madam
On
Mayor?
either
Excuse me?
the data analysis as well as the officers?
Oh, yes. So the data, the crime analyst would be $145,000. And for the 4 police officers would be per year, all 4, $612,000. So the combined amount for personnel will be $960,000 per year. And of course, the extra $75,000 for the cameras.
Mayor and Council, point of clarification with the distinction between authorizing positions and budgeting is the authorization is to add the positions to our position control. The budget is to actually pay for those. We don't anticipate incurring wages and salaries for the positions until the new proposed 24-25 operating budget. So the budget, we will request that as part of the 24-25 and incorporate it into that budget. For the time being, the authorization is simply adding the positions to our complement.
So we add the positions at 0 cost.
Correct, because we don't have the positions today, and we don't anticipate, and you'll hear, I'm going to call Acting Chief Milligan to come up. We're anticipating that the new officers will be cadets, and you'll see that in the timeline to recruit, it's anywhere between 3 to 4 months on the best case scenario. We will most likely have to send these cadets to the academy. There's only 4 academies throughout the year. At this point, we'd be looking to send them sometime after July 1st. And so we don't anticipate incurring any costs other than for recruitment purposes, which is backgrounds, medicals, during this fiscal year, 23-24. And so that's the distinction between authorized positions and then authorized and the budget. Because we don't anticipate that we'll have those bodies before the end of
Well,
the fiscal year.
and one reason I may have asked is because we were already anticipating growth with Gossamer, and we've been adding positions because of that. We've been adding officer positions because of the growth.
No, we've not requested positions for Gossamer Grove, Mayor Pro Tem.
The last time we did a request for officers was 2019.
4, I believe, were added back in 2019.
Was it, that was when we did the K-9, right, Gilbert?
Because
No.
we've always talked about that.
Well, it's been talked about for the need to add additional officers out there to the existing complement that we have.
Mhm, mhm.
But it's going to require, for officer safety, minimum 2 officers on patrol during whatever shifts that are deployed for Gossamer Grove.
For clarification, one-time setup cost for the license plate reader is 92,000. And then it's an ongoing cost for the same license plate reader for 75,000
Annually.
annually. So you're asking on an annual basis, budgeted for 24-25. So not just 23-24, but let's talk 24-25. You would be doing 75,000 for the flock, 117,000 for the dispatcher, 50,000 for the extra help, and then 757,000 for the 4 positions plus 1 crime data analyst for $1 million a year addition. Is that a correct
Approximately,
statement?
yes. Mhm, right. If you're incorporating it into 24-25, that would be ultimately the request.
See, and that's what I was asking. I mean, it's not today's expense, but that's what we'd be considering
It's tomorrow's expense. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. That's kind of, is it gonna happen today? Is it gonna happen honestly in the next year? No, because we have to find the folks. I get it, but we at least need to budget for it now and understand what we're doing. I get it.
Yeah, so at this time, I'd like to ask Acting Chief Mulligan to come up. He's got some additional slides on the request for PD, who can provide additional information. Randy?
We're gonna continue with Tanya.
Based on timing, what are we looking at for completion here?
It should be no more than 10 minutes, Mayor. It's just a matter of Acting Chief Mulligan providing some additional information on what he's requesting. And then I'm gonna need council to authorize or not authorize the request.
Okay.
So that's all it will entail. Randy, go ahead.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Acting Chief Milligan. I'm also going to bring up Lieutenant Stevens, who's an administration side, who's also going to help me present some of these items here. Our first item on to give you guys further information on is going to be on the flock camera system. And Lieutenant Stevens can provide that information.
Honorable Mayor, Council. The Flock system is a license plate reading system. These are standalone cameras at strategic intersections throughout the city. We've requested 25 cameras. Just for information, these are limited database cameras. These are not held for extended periods of time. Flock has a 30-day rotation on the information that is seized through Flock. It is only capturing the license plate and the vehicle itself. So we are able to search based on vehicle color, description, if there are any special characteristics such as stickers, missing paint, those types of things. We've had some great successes solving some crimes here locally. The city of Wasco has the cameras, Bakersfield has the cameras, and there's several cameras in the county jurisdiction. We're kind of the donut hole in the middle that doesn't have them. However, we are able to access their cameras, which is how we've been able to solve those. And when we get our cameras, we would allow them to access our cameras as well. So we would fill in that hole where we don't have it covered. So that's the way Flock works in concept.
Donut hole.
When you say Wasco, you mean the county?
No.
the
Wasco
city.
Sorry. Do they have this equipment already?
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
City of
just-
Wasco,
They
City of
just
Delano.
purchased. Yeah.
Yes. And they are operational. I confirmed that
Mhm.
with the city of Wasco.
And you said we can only keep that, the photos, I guess you'd call them, for 30 days and then it's gone.
Correct. It is only kept for 30 days. So this is not something where we could go back 6 months or a year in the past.
I
This is
see.
basically, these are tips and leads that we can use to solve a crime when it occurs or in close proximity to it occurring. So it would be used for real time or almost real time data.
What's time for deployment? How long is it gonna take to install?
With Flock, and council approval, we're hoping within 6 months we have this up and running.
It seems to be the way that we have to go today, only because we can't have an officer or somebody watching everybody at even 25 places here, and then you don't have anything to even record it, so. Safety for where we're living today, safety for where we're experiencing what's happening everywhere is concerning, so. I don't believe we'll have any negative appeal on it. I mean, when they understand it's not cameras, it's going to evade anybody.
It's not meant for the,
No.
how do I say this correctly? It's absolutely meant to stop the fire, but it's not meant to.
Well, it doesn't take people. I mean, it's not people's faces or anything like that.
Right.
Correct, which is one distinction. It does capture the vehicle,
Right.
the license plate, and very, very, very rarely do you capture the occupants of the vehicle. It is basically an overall from a distance of the vehicle.
So you could put one on manual that call in, there's a speeder going 90 miles an hour. You could pull that up and see what kind of car it was.
So we could get the vehicle description, we could get the license plate of the vehicle and work it from there. As far as speeding and traffic enforcement goes,
It's not.
traffic enforcement is done on site. But for vehicle thefts, vehicle burglaries,
Can I do a citizen's,
Request?
ticket?
that would be if you were the witness of the violation and you chose to do that.
By the time I get my phone call the PD and they ask under question, which is good, he's already gone.
Correct.
So I could say this time, this hour, or this moment, and they pull up the camera, I'll sign a ticket, citizen's ticket, or
Yes, that is a possibility if you were willing to do that. then at that point, you would be signing the citation as the observer of the violation.
But
Yes.
this camera deal is really intended for stolen vehicles or things that connected to,
Correct. And if you think about it from a perspective of crimes are always committed, or 90% of
Yes.
the crimes, somebody has to get to a location and they have to leave
Right.
that location. This is to try and capture those folks coming into the city as well as where they are going throughout the city based on vehicle descriptions and license plates.
yeah, so you're in and out. Yeah, it's really big policing.
No, I mean, I had that hit and run at my house and
Yes,
I had to chase him down myself.
And this would be an aspect where that would be
Mhm.
beneficial, weight based on license plates and vehicle description.
yeah, it's big time.
The one in
We
Madison.
would pick the places and the intersections that we would want to set the
Well,
cameras up on.
No, it looks
Shows
like they already
me,
have it
doesn't it?
mapped.
So there is a map attached to the slide presentation with input from the police department and the administration, as well as patrol officers, where we've located 25 of the most advantageous intersections to utilize for the additional, for
So it's a
the,
stationary piece camera that's stationary. It's not on a police vehicle even.
correct. No, it is
Yeah.
stationary. It is not mounted on a vehicle or anything
Mhm.
like that.
If you found that you needed it somewhere else from where one was at, let's say something changed,
Good question.
that capability is there to relocate it?
It is. If we don't have power at the location where the camera is going to be installed, they do have solar to locate them in different areas. As far as moving a camera, I believe that's part of our annual
The fee?
fee
The,
that we-
okay.
Okay, all good on the
Well,
questions.
and they've been, excuse me, but they've been in use for some time already. It's not a brand new deal. It's just
No,
new
no,
for
this
us.
is, Flock has been around for several years
Yes.
and utilized in other jurisdictions for several years.
Mhm. Thank you.
And I will move on to the additional dispatcher position. We're requesting one full-time dispatcher. Currently, there are 6 dispatchers assigned, handling 30,000 non-emergency phone calls per year and in excess of 5,000 911 calls per year. So the addition of a full-time dispatcher and an extra help dispatcher is what the request is for. And I'd be willing to answer any questions on that.
So what's the ratio for dispatcher? I know there's like a 1 per 1,000 for an officer. But is there a ratio for dispatchers?
We don't
No.
kind of quantify the
Oh.
dispatchers in that way.
So are we adding because of the growth that's south?
That is the anticipation,
Mhm.
yes. And the call volume increase.
Yeah. Okay.
No other questions on that? Go ahead.
Okay, we'll move on to the crime data analysis position. Staff believes that there is a need for a crime data analysis to benefit the Shafter Police Department's police efforts. This position and in the amount of time that I have is evaluating data related to criminal activities and calls for service, okay? Based off historical trends, predictions, and patterns, basically a data-driven crime prevention tool, okay? The primary purpose of the crime data analysis position is to support our operations division. And this goes from our detectives division, patrol, traffic, gang unit, and the SRO position. With regards to the traffic position, we can collect data regarding collisions in certain areas within the city, speeders in the city, time of day, and vehicle descriptions to provide to the officers for more of a hot zone, if you will, for officers to respond to at certain times. This is something that we do, excuse me, already on the patrol side, sharing information, but I want to get it to the point where we're preventing criminal activity by having a data person compiling this data. The use of data to anticipate where crimes will occur for crime prevention. Once again, the identifying of the hotspots and forecasting future crime. And once again, talking about the quality of life concerns, we have DUI, enforcement, reckless drivers, the sideshows, fireworks, loud music, and municipal code violations. So once again, this is stuff that we do now with our patrol, but I want to get more into the preventive side. And if you guys have any questions, I can take those now.
We have a RIMS program in service and we've had it for many years, right?
Yes.
How does that fit in with this?
It's a big tool because that person will be able to collect all that data from our CAD system and compile it into a report for administration and patrol personnel.
Are we even using RIMS now?
Yes.
And what is it giving us?
Well, it gives us data, but you have to have somebody sitting down to collect that data.
What we did in the past.
Have somebody to collect
Yeah,
data.
we've had it in operation, haven't we?
We have it in operations for our patrol personnel, but it takes a tremendous amount of time for somebody to compile all this data, criminal reports, incident logs, phone calls for suspect descriptions to pinpoint this type of activity.
I'd like to learn more about it before we vote on it. I'd like to do more research on it.
To what degree? I don't think I understand that question.
Yeah, I don't understand why we need to have another person just to do the analyst part of it and we can't just use what we have. And I'd like to see us just hold on that one.
Am I understanding that the point of the analyst is to free up the time of the officer who's doing the work right now, so the officer's back on the field?
Absolutely. The whole goal behind this would be to get officers back on the street where they need to be and have somebody inside the police department collecting this data and giving informational reports to officers and command staff.
Is this analyst position a post-certified?
No,
So the benefit here is that we don't have to be post-certified for the position, and it frees up the
Mhm.
post-certified employees to be back on the streets where we want them.
absolutely, Mayor.
Any other questions on this?
Would that extra help be able to do that? If we got the dispatcher plus one extra help?
See, we aren't using RIMS right now. It's not in effect. And so this is gonna bring that back.
For clarification, RIMS is your records management system.
Yeah.
So we track, it's used by the dispatchers when they're taking in calls for service, running plates and that sort of thing. What the analyst will do is extrapolate the data from the RIM system to run analysis and look for trends on certain activities, criminal activities or otherwise, or individuals or suspects. But it's being extracted from the RIM systems that when the call comes in and the dispatcher receives it, they're using RIMS to input all that data. The analyst will then extrapolate that data and run analysis on it. The extra help could do it, but they'll have to have analytical skill set to be able to do it. It's not clerical. Have you done any type of analysis like you saw the financial model earlier? That's analytical work. That's taking data, kind of not manipulating it, but looking at trends, analyzing it, writing reports. And so the part-time help could do it, but we'd basically be looking to hire someone with analytical skills, which that's how we would advertise for that position.
It makes sense if you're adding, Mayor Pro Tem is noting that it's, RIMS isn't used as much as we should be using it at this time. From a records perspective, crime analysis, you're looking back at past information and seeing what kind of trends you can find. I understand that. It's especially if we're not using it to that degree, we do need to use that more. But then you start adding in items like the flock system and working with the other jurisdictions. We're either going to push this off onto our patrol officers to do that work, or we're going to find someone who's not a patrol officer to manage that and have an available resource that doesn't have to be post-certified. I think the idea that doesn't have to be post-certified is a bigger part for me. And that's not to degrade anyone who is post. I think that's important, but it's that much more difficult to find someone who's post-certified versus non-post-certified, especially in this role.
So we're looking to get the officers on the street who make the arrest and the person, civilian person, doing this work through a GIS mapping program and software program that goes with the position. And these positions usually come with a 4-year degree or experience to equal.
Yeah, I think with respects to the extra help position, I think that wouldn't be suitable for it. Again, because one, if they come in, they have to learn the RIM system. They would have to learn the different databases that are used. And if you're transitioning people through and coming on and off, I think that would not be the best approach to benefit the community. As far as RIMS and my experience with that, the officers use it every day now for to its full capacity. Probably not, because they don't have the time for that. But I think having something like this in place would benefit not only the department, but the city as a whole, because this analyst could take the time to sit down, analyze what's going on, see what these crime trends are, and get ahead of it and become proactive instead of reactive, like the acting chief is saying. That's my 2 cents to that.
And the big component, if I can too, is working with other agencies on the same type of criminal things. We have solved several crimes that I can't even talk about, unfortunately, because of this type of work, but it involves the work of a lot of our patrol staff and civilian staff to compile this. But I really want to get to the point where we're preventing it instead of actually hitting it after the crime's already occurred.
Absolutely.
So you're telling me then that all the other cities are doing analysts like this?
There is other agencies who have.
There is some, yes,
Yes.
but I don't know of any in our own area. I just didn't know if it's premature. That's why I just wanted to hold off and let's see what happens here and learn more about it before I have to authorize
I
it.
think we're on a really weird field, right? We're not, if you go ask BPD, you go ask Kern County Sheriffs, they have that position, but you're also dealing with the hundreds of thousands. You know, if you go ask Delano, would probably be our closest sister city at 50-ish thousand. I'm presuming they may have this, but I don't know. But then if you start going into like the McFarlands.
Yeah, that's why I didn't know if we we're that large of a city that we couldn't handle it. I know what you're saying, but I would like to just learn more about it before we authorize it.
Right, with the growth of the city, sophistication of the city.
It is
the extra
coming.
substation and so
It is
forth.
coming. It's not here
Mhm.
yet, so that's
Continue.
fine.
Okay, any further questions regarding that? Okay, so moving on to the 4 officer positions down south. We're requesting the positions only, funding will become later. Additionally, those positions will have to be outfitted with equipment and vehicles, but we can talk about that at a later date. And once again, this is establishing 4 officers for expansion of our down, south area. So in 2022, there were 681 law enforcement events associated with the Gossamer Grove area. In 23, there were 898. That gives us a 32% increase in law enforcement activity just in 1 year. There's currently 1,600 occupied homes at Gossamer Grove area with a total population of 5,600. There is a projected 300 residences to be built each year down there, as we know. Currently, the substation down south is expected to be completed by the first quarter of 2025. Right now, the police department is actively recruiting cadets to fill our open vacancies. Currently, it takes a minimum of 16 months to fill a vacant position. We have recruitment and background at 4 to 5 months. Academy is 6 months long, and field training takes 4 to 5 months long. So we're looking at minimally 16 months before we can even fill a spot. And I can take any questions on that.
Council questions on the additional officers? Hearing no questions.
I'd like to go back, Vanessa, really quick. Can we go back to the previous presentation on, that had the request? Please. And go down to, start with economic development, please. Okay, so I'm gonna cover the, really quick there, the request being made for the mid-year. One time 300,000 for legal fees in economic development. It's like, you want to take them as a group individually
What are the legal fees?
for outside legal counsel related to the state matter on the tax allocation.
Thank you. Yeah, you can take it as per slide. On economic development for the request, it's $312,000 for, this is a mid-year budget increase.
For 23-24, correct.
Do I have any nays on this before we move on? We know what the legal fees are.
We're
Dealing with that.
we're already in it.
I know, I just want to make sure there's no questions here. Continue on.
Okay, so that's a yes.
That's a yes.
Okay, all right, next slide, please. With regards to the other funds on the 68,000 for repair, these are maintenance and repairs. You're talking about 28,000 and the additional 25. So you're looking at 93,000 on other funds for repairs and maintenance.
MCCF fence, I thought we already had a proposal and an acceptance to remove that fence.
We did, and we
Okay.
tried to find the money. We put in the staff report in the fiscal impact that we would try to absorb it in the existing budget, and if we couldn't, that we would come back at mid-year and request the monies for it.
I
So-
thought you put another fence up and you'd come down.
What's that? Put another.
Yeah, the fence is gone.
We are using the fence. We
Yes.
repurposed it. But we did, at the time that we asked to award, we said that we would try to absorb it in the existing budget, and if not, we would come back immediately.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Otherwise, I think we have 5 thumbs up.
So facilities is what total?
93,000.
And the fence is coming down,
It's already come
It's
down.
already down. That's why I said it's gone.
we might have to put it back up in the.
Yeah, that's right, see?
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so on this one, the flock system is 92,000, one-time setup, and then the 75,000 for ongoing. The 75,000 and the 92,000 would be for this fiscal year 23-24. The additional full-time dispatcher would be in the current fiscal year as well, and the extra help of 50,000.
Help me understand those numbers rather quickly.
Okay,
The
Roger?
ongoing annual cost of 75,000 at 75,000 per fiscal year.
Yes.
So you're not asking for a mid-year budget. You should be asking for a partial. Or are we having to pay 75,000 now and 75,000 in July?
So when we purchase it, that'll become our renewal date. So we'll buy it this fiscal year.
92,000 is the purchase, and that includes the
This-
initial ongoing.
So it'll be the 92 plus the 75. The 92 covers the cameras and the installation. The 75 is the ongoing that we have to pay every year for the license, basically, if you will. So if we make the purchase in May of this fiscal year, we'll need to pay the full 75,000. And next year's budget, 24-25, we'll be requesting another 75 to pay for the renewal in May of 25.
Okay, so it is a 12-month rolling then. Correct. Thank you. And then the full-time dispatcher annual cost of 117, we're going to cover the full amount on this year as a mid-year budget.
I don't know, we have someone in queue that we might be able to hire, no, so,
There's currently no list established.
no, so this would be pro rata share on the 117. That's the annual cost. So if we do 3 months, then it'll be about 40,000.
So that's going to be the same question for the extra help. So if we're going to show that it either should be the prorated amount for mid-year budget, or we should knock that and say this is going to be for the upcoming new budget, but it can't be for both.
Okay, so I would say for the dispatcher, if we're gonna look at possibly 30 months, I would say it would be 40,000 for the dispatcher, and then extra help. What do you think? How many months? Same months? 3 months?
3 months.
Okay, so I'd say about 15,000 for the extra help in the current 23-24 budget. So 40,000 for the dispatcher.
12,500.
Best case scenario, we're able to hire. We've had success with hiring dispatchers as well as the extra help. So we'd be asking for the 40,000 plus 15, so 55,000.
Okay, so total for this year would be, oh man, I'm not going to math as fast as I want to, but total for this year, you're looking at roughly
It's the total,
300,000.
the total for this year estimate, initial estimates, it's 179,000 mid-year adjustment for that police request.
That's on a pro rata share?
Yes,
72, sorry, 75 plus 40. You said it was how much?
179,000.
222,000. Because you have to add in the 92,000 plus the 75,000 ongoing cost, plus the 40,000 for the dispatcher, plus the 15,000 for the annual help, right?
Okay.
So we're 222,000. We have confirmation on this?
I'm double checking. real quick.
But Roger, didn't you say there was police one needed 179?
If I can, city manager. The 92,000 is covering the very first year of the flock with the installation. The following year, 75,000, it's $168,000 contract for 2 years.
Standard.
147,000. Thank you.
Yeah.
I knew something didn't seem right. Thank you for looking into that.
Yeah.
147,000. Okay, thank you. So it'd be 147,000 for the flock license, one-time setup cost with the renewal that's included in that. And the 3 months for the dispatcher, and 3 months for the extra help, barring that we can find that person tomorrow. Okay, $222,000. Any questions on that half of it? Let's talk there first. Is everyone okay with that? Okay, 5 yeses on that, sir. Let's skip the crime data analyst for a second and the 4 police officers. Do I have any motions to say no to that? Seeing no one looking at me and no one saying anything. I think you have 5 yeses. Can I get a confirmation? It's a big number, please.
And just for clarification, it's just authorizing the positions.
That is correct. With no equipment at this time, just authorizing position.
Correct.
You have yeses on that, please.
Okay.
The crime data analyst,
That's the one I wanted to hold.
that's the one you want to hold.
Just wait and get some more information on it and just hold it. I think it made me feel better.
If I may, Mayor, for clarifications, Mayor Pro Tem, what additional information would council like to see?
I
with
just
regards
need
to-
to ask more questions out of the meeting and just kind of understand it better.
Okay, so request to meet with the acting chief and command staff.
Whichever, yeah.
Fair enough. And then we can bring this up for,
As part of the
again,
regular
this
budget.
isn't something you're going to find tomorrow, but we can bring this up for additional conversation. I would say at the April meeting, are we okay to have that conversation in April?
Mhm.
Okay,
please
so
do
bring that in. Okay, all right. With that, nothing further, Mayor and Council.
Hello, Grove students. I apologize for us running a little behind on this one. You've gotten to be a part of budget sessions, so thank you for this. Give us one moment to close this one and we'll get to you on the next one. Sorry. With that said, there are no other items on the management report for the special meeting, and I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn at 6:26 PM.
I'll move with her.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Proud, a second by Councilmember Espinoza. All those in favor with